Psych. No. Welcome back, basic family. It's the end of the day. I'm going to put on some lipstick. I'm going to put my hair up, and we are going to talk a little bit about trauma today. So obviously trauma is a broad spectrum. It doesn't necessarily have a one forward path. It goes off into many different directions with many different results, and it grows, and it continuously expands, and sometimes it gets smaller, and it's not often thought about, it's not often talked about. So I have a lot of things I want to say, and grab a snack because we're going to be here for a second. I just earlier got back from meeting a friend. I won't say who she is. I don't need to say who she is, but she is somebody who's always been very special to me. Circumstances in our lives have prevented us from being friends, especially in the past. And while with this friend, her and I were going over some very traumatic situations, and I told her, I said, you do realize you have been viciously abused to the point it's pretty much changed how you act and how you present yourself to this day. And, we had this conversation once before, especially in the present, because like I said, our lives have changed, and we are able to finally hang out and talk and do the things that, we couldn't do in the past. And I find that very wonderful. And I have a lot of love for this person, and I'm very grateful. However, because of the circumstances that happened to both her, me, and whoever else dealing with whatever they've dealt with their situations, it's become to where that person acts different, that person walks different, that person presents herself differently. She is very skittish, she is very nervous, she is very insecure in certain ways. And I mean, don't get me wrong and think that I'm sitting here talking about a stranger being like, she's this, she's that. No, she is a beautiful human being with such radiant, gorgeous energy, and I respect and admire her change and her power so much. However, my point is trauma, I'm a perfect example of that, changes people. It changes people over time. And for me, when I see people who have gone through trauma, I see, especially myself, and I've used this phrase before, so correct me if I'm wrong. I might not, say things the way that I want to say them or express them the way I want to express them, but that's why I have a side channel to complain and rant and everything else, so you can take it how you will. But I believe people who have gone through a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean because every problem is valid in my opinion, but when I say through a lot, I mean they become wiser, and it's a very unfortunate way to become that way. It's like saying, it's like what do they want? Not a shaman, but a person who's taken a lot of psychedelics and then comes and claims, you know what, I'm a lot wiser because of those experiences, compared to somebody who's went through, very real world, jungles and rainforests and places that you and I will never make it to, and then come back and be like, you only took psychedelics, there's no way. And then I was the one who actually went through all of that physically, realistically. I hope you're understanding my point. So when I say every problem is valid, take a child, for example, take my daughter. So my daughter will come home and she'll be upset a little bit about her friend or something. I'm making an example about her friend who says, they called me mean or they told me to stop talking. And she'll be really, really upset over that. And instead of being like, oh, you have no idea what the real world holds for you, Satori, I'll sit down and I'll say, that's completely understandable. That's your world. That's your perception right now as a 9-year-old, is that your whole world is falling apart because somebody said something mean to you that hurt your feelings. So that's what I mean when I say every problem is valid. When I talk about, trauma, though, And again, trauma is a broad spectrum. Things like SA, things like narcissistic abuse. It doesn't really matter. It's the same concept. When I say things like just overall serious, over time, consistent stacking and stacking and stacking of trauma, it genuinely changes you as a person. And I am using my friend as an example because in the beginning, when this was happening, she would have never recognized this was happening to her. And even at the time when I was friends and in her life, I wouldn't have either, because neither of us would have ever expected the results to take or come out the way that they did. So I wanted to talk a little bit about today about how trauma has changed me. I'm not going to use her the entire video. And what I've done to kind of use that negativity and that severe, I'm diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder compared to just post-traumatic stress disorder. The only difference between the two is CPTSD goes on for a very long period of time, as I'm stating, so stacking and stacking and stacking on trauma, and then it completely changes you as a person, changes the way you act, the way you behave, and that's the same thing I'm saying about my friend. So I'm going to use me as an example today and talk a little bit about how trauma's changed me. And let me preface this by saying I do understand it's a little bit different for those watching because you only see what I choose to share with you. And from now on, I do want to say, because in the past, I posted a lot of story times on this channel, and a lot of them are privatized at this point because it just seemed like all of those videos were such negative videos because they were story times from my past that I only chose to share with you. It was rare that I ever chose to share a very happy story, and, I think a lot of those things are private moments, so I'll make an example. The quiet time I get to sit and have with my kids is something that I'll never be able to get on here and just talk to you about because it's something you have to experience yourself. It's the same conversation of if you don't have kids after you're 30, you're a waste of space. Or if you have kids now, or you know what I mean? That conversation, like, I don't want to have kids or I do want to have kids. It's like you just have to experience it. But if you don't, it's not like I'm going to make you understand anyway. Those private moments that I have, those happy, genuine, pure, wonderful moments I have with my children are something that A, is so meaningful to me, but B, there's no reason to share that with you. I mean, there's the son and mom vlog, or there's my daughter and I opening blind bags, but I'm talking about just that intimate, quiet time that we would be sitting and watching a movie and I'm looking over and seeing my son like laugh. Do you know what I mean? So I don't share those moments with you on here because those are moments that you should get to experience yourself, whether it be with a child or a friend or a significant other or a family member. It doesn't matter. So I always want to preface these videos now by saying I only choose to share these negative experiences with you in hopes that you'll learn something from them. So as I go on and talk about my problems today, and as I go on and talk about, poor Karuna, poor Sarah, poor this and that, it's not what I mean. It's simply what I want to share to help you learn, or at least, help me grow. So with that being said, and as I'm sitting here getting ready to talk about trauma, I just realized my 32-year-old self had a PB&J for dinner because I got home late because of having dinner with this friend. So obviously my trauma, and I'm not going to sit here and talk about every situation, but I mean, a lot of these lessons I've learned in therapy. And obviously the thing, it's like somebody who works out and they're going to come and tell you, well, the only way to get fit is to start exercising and treating your body better. And then someone like me will look at them and be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because it takes work. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a lazy piece of crap. So it's the same concept a lot of the time, especially when people are continuously going through those bad experiences. So whenever you see somebody and they're just like, I don't want to get into therapy, therapy's going to do nothing for me because I've tried it before and I didn't like it. I mean, it took me pretty much to get forced into therapy because of what happened in 2021 with my undiagnosed Graves' disease, causing havoc on my endocrine system, causing me to literally lose it. Bo Burnham is pretty much what put me in the psych ward anyway. I mean, you guys know, it was my 3-hour video. It was a stack of things. However, I watched inside and I was like, like, really? But a lot of lessons that I have learned, and you're seeing me cut off because I'll like have a brain fart and just like literally stop and be like, oh, wait, where am I? It's just what it is. I learned in therapy that it started out by trying to figure out why I grew up doing the things that I did, a lot of those things being taking advantage of people. And I'm very honest about that. I'm very real about that because that is someone who I was. And that's not justifying those things, but I can also compare it to the reasons that I did that because that was all I knew. It's how I learned from the very beginning. So perfect example is, and something that may be able to help you too, is, maybe why do you want to have an affair with your spouse? Or why do you want to go out and use your friend for this and then lie to someone about that? It might be because whenever you were younger, the very first person that you thought you could trust did something like that to you. And it took me to figure out the first friend I ever had was the man who molested me. And that's very unfortunate. I mean, I had my childhood friends, I had this, but the person I unfortunately did spend the most time with, as my father worked at a jail at the time, my mother was working, doing her thing, and my Bubba, who was my grandma, she was like, go play outside. So my first friend was the man who took advantage of me, boy at the time, I guess. And, I remember developing feelings for that person. I didn't understand, I hadn't even hit, I gotta watch what I say, but the uality at that age, 9 years old or whatever, I didn't hit that at that point. So I'm out there thinking, well, he wants me to do this because he cares about me and he loves me. And the only way that he's going to love me is if I show this affection and this type of love back to him. So every time we would hang out, he would not show me any type of what I thought physical affection was the only affection. He wouldn't show me any of that unless he asked me and I performed that for him. Or I would go and just be like, well, he wants this and he'll give me attention if I do this. I was 9. Okay, so let's make that apparent. So then because of that, growing up, my first boyfriends, I mean, I spent a lot of time with girls prior to boys, but that is how I thought affection was. I mean, even into my teenage years, I was like, this boy is only going to accept me if I do things for him very quickly. So often my relationships or my, intimate relationships, not friendships or whatever, would always progress into, gotta watch my words, into Yule relationships very quickly. And yes, even using my friendships, a lot of those I would become very open with very quickly. And that stems all the way back to my childhood. And I don't want to sit here also and say, everything stems back to the childhood, you know what I mean? Like using that original psychological theory or whatever. It's different for everyone. PTSD, trauma, anything is different for everyone. And like I said, how it kind of expands and how it gets smaller. So again, it was up until I got into therapy that I was able to start working all this out. And I never thought that somebody like me genuinely would ever get into therapy and stay into therapy because I grew up with the concept that I was the only person who knew what was best for me. I had protected myself so long being so alone that I knew what was best for me. Nobody's going to sit here and unpack all of these past memories. It's been 2 years now. I started therapy in August, I do believe, in 2021. So we are at the 2-year mark and I am still flourishing in therapy. I have a wonderful therapist who I hold a lot of love and a lot of space for because that person has changed my life immaculately. Like there is no other way except for big meaningful words to describe this person. I'm very grateful for them. And I had spoken prior about transference, and lucky for me, my therapist is so understanding and open that we found out that the reason that I had felt that way stems back because that's how I perceived any relationship I would ever have. I mean, that's who I thought I could trust. So talking to my friend today and finding out some of the things that someone did to her, what they did to her, I gagged. I gagged when I heard some of the things. And I'm not smiling because I'm like, you know what I mean? I'm smiling because I think everybody perceives serious things differently, but my unfortunate thing is I laugh. Like I'm like, that's crazy. It's like, it's not funny. It's just, I try to I mean, that's what I know, and I have to work on that. And I'm doing this and that. And that's what I like to say with life at this point. I'm 32, and after everything I've been through, holding my mom as she took her last breath, and, that sounds so dramatic, but what's interesting is when my mom went into hospice, the hospice nurses, Winber Hospice in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, the most caring women you will ever meet, they sat with me and said, it's going to be pretty anticlimactic, or climactic or whatever. It's not going to be like in the movies where she takes her dying breath and like you're going to see a soul leave the body. And they were because I was out of my mind. When my mom initially went into hospice, thought, oh, she's going to get better. Like, she's just coming home to sleep for a couple hours. Like, she's going to be fine. Like, no. Like, for 7 days, I mean, she was in the ICU. Like, altogether, it was a 9-day thing. But for 7 days, like, I stopped eating and drinking and all of this crazy stuff because I felt guilty that she couldn't eat and drink. And I had the perception in my head because it was all so real and new. I had never seen somebody pass away before in front of me. I mean, I've seen car accidents, I've seen videos, but it had never happened in front of me. So I was like, no, she's going to be fine. So my point anyway is when all of that happened and she finally did take her last breaths, I was like, wow, this is awful, but it really was just, it was crazy. So you know what I mean? Like it was just very like, she just took her last breaths, and, I spent some time laying next to her body, and then we called the funeral home and they came and picked her up, cremated her, and I got her ashes. But it seems so mundane, doesn't it? It seems so just like, but it doesn't process right away. Trauma never processes right away. Do you understand what I'm saying? So all of those things that happened as we go back and back further into our past and figure these things out, we understand that we never really had time to process it because we were growing. We were children. I mean, we were teenagers. We were whatever age. We were yesterday. And time moves on. Time goes by. So slow. No, it's like time goes on and more things happen, and then we just never get to process it. So I never got to process like my mother and the things she had done to me. And I was just talking to my daughter about this during dinner. I'm eating a PBJ. She's eating like a good old like homemade dinner, chicken, all this good stuff. And I'm just like, oh. But she like, I told her, I was like, we were all at the table. I was like, I'm going to run out and do a side channel video, talk a little bit about trauma. And she's like, what's trauma? And, I mean, they know what it is, but like, she's too young to understand those things. She's 9 years old. It's the same concept that I feel about how their school teaches second graders about 9/11. I'm like, what are these kids going to do with any of this information? Like, that's a whole separate subject, but like, I mean, it's always honor the lives who were lost and always honor like the firefighters and all the people who helped. However, it's like second graders, what are they doing with that information? So it's like that. So I tried to explain it to her and say, your, problem is valid if you have it. However, trauma for you would be something really big. Like a trauma for a 9-year-old, like I said, my daughter, would be maybe the death of my mother, grandma. Like she was home, like the kids were home whenever grandma died. My son didn't really take it hard. My daughter just didn't understand. I mean, this happened in 2022. This was before they went through their huge growth spurt. But my point is, because I'm getting off topic, is they didn't have time really to process that. Like even afterwards, whenever I tried to sit there with them and say, grandma passed away, she's not coming back. Like they just didn't get it and they didn't really care. Now, as time went on, whenever my son would hear like Enya, and I laugh because it's cute, but my mom used to play that kind of music around them and take them out to, it's called the Quemahoning Dam. It's a dam that like, it's all nature stuff. My mom would like play the stuff on the speakers in her car and like make the kids get out and pick up rocks. And my son will hear that song like that. And it's just cute because he'll get, it's not cute what he does, but I'm saying he'll get really upset. And it's now that that's happening. When she passed away, nobody cried. Nobody, I took the time. I mean, the kids didn't know, they were asleep. She passed away, I think 9:30, 6 p.m. Do not quote me on that, but it was late. They were in bed and I laid with her and I spent the time. And as I said in my 3-hour video, when that happened and I did lay with her body, like hospice told me, lay with her and spend time. Just spend time and think and feel everything you need to get out while her body, you know what I mean, like sits lifeless. Like, I know it sounds grim, but there's a whole thing with that. It's just spending time. And I never got closure. And I think I always say that my favorite quote is, we're all just walking each other home. It is my quote. That's me. That is, it gives me chills talking about it. We're all just walking each other home. It makes me want to cry, but, laying with my mom, I'll never forget that, it was like, I think 9:30 when we had called the funeral home, and it felt like 5 minutes. It felt like minutes. And I looked at the clock. It was like 11:45. I mean, I'm using time right now. Like, this might not be the exact, but it was 3 hours before the funeral about 2 or 3 hours before the funeral home got there to take her away. And I just remember I was like, I just looked down and I was like, what? Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, time is different. Time goes by. Like we don't have time to process the trauma. We don't, and even to this day, I still haven't taken time to process it. So where I'm getting at with all this, because I don't want this video to go on too long, is it takes time. How about we go with that? It's sad because, again, as I said, when you see people, especially those in addiction is a perfect example, who have, gotten out of it and have been able to get clean or are in the process or continuous process of getting clean. And you can truly see when an addict is working on getting clean, cleaning up their act, everything like that. And you see there's something different about an addict. There's something different about anybody who's gone through a lot of trauma. They hold this wisdom in them. And it's a very, like I said in the beginning, sad point, because they had to go through all of that to learn to live. And unfortunately for me, that is something that I'm not saying I'm full of wisdom. Trust me, I'm full of air. It's what I'm filled with. But I do feel that I can see those people. How's that? Does that make sense? When you look, I mean, like I said, I'm a recovering addict of 11 years now, 12 years now. I'm still on methadone maintenance. I did get clean and then I did go back. You look at them and you see that they just hold themselves differently, especially those who have been clean for years, like really went on to change their lives. You just see those people, hospice nurses, perfect example. They just hold a certain wisdom, and it's because of what they've seen. It's because of what they've been through. And I promise you that they're still processing their trauma. So my point is it takes time. If you're sitting there and thinking, well, I haven't really gone through anything in life, it's like, that doesn't mean that you're not, or that you're incapable of learning and feeling that connection to others and that empathy. And Shane Dawson ruined the whole empathy thing, didn't he? Is he like calls himself an empath? It's like, please stop. Everybody started saying that empaths were like awful because of Shane Dawson. And I'm like, you've all ruined the perfect thing for me. Like, please stop. Like, people with empathy are so important. It's just young kids, like, flock to a creator and they're like, I'm an empath too. And it's like, then people were like, well, they're overusing the word, so it's not important anymore. It's like, no, you guys are all missing the point. It's a form of compassion. That's one thing. And using my mother today was a perfect example, because Her and I went and got tattoos together in the midst of her abusing me, in the midst of her calling, CPS, doing all kinds of evil, vicious, horrible, hateful things towards me. And that's another topic for another time, because again, as I preface the video, you see me talk a lot about people who have traumatized me. But what about me who's done that to others? What about the people I've traumatized or the people that I've hurt? And there are people out there. There are people that I've done that. And like I said, I don't justify that by my behaviors that can be explained from when they were younger. However, there are reasons for the things that I have done. And there are reasons for the reason. It's, I hate bringing up my stalker at the moment, but he's a perfect example. I look at John, and I'm doing my best not to say my stalker, but I'm really trying to figure out how to phrase that. But, using him as a perfect example, I was talking about this the other day. John does what John does because John's hurt. I do take it personally now, and I still will do and am doing whatever I need to do to protect my family. And there's a whole update to that at one point. But John does what he does because somebody hurt John. And as far as I've heard from neighbors, from people who grew up with him, from all of this, John does what John does because somebody did that to John. And I understand that in a way. I genuinely do. But I think John misses the point to where not everybody is out to get him. And that's a lesson that I had to learn after so long, you know what I mean? Protecting myself constantly, pushing away friendships. These are all videos for other times and lessons for other times if you're even interested. But the point is we need to also recognize where we went wrong. We need to recognize the things that we have done as well and learn where the line is drawn to where we need to figure out where it's come from and how we can fix it moving forward. So like I said, the point with my mom and the tattoo and everything, the compassion, I have a tattoo that says compassion. People have that empathy and that wisdom when they've gone through something so much. And they just exude it, and you can see it. You can see that difference in people. And that's why I used addicts as an example, because I surround myself with them all the time when I go back to the clinic. And, you see a lot of them who you look at them and you're like, they have physically gone through a lot. Their body's gone through a lot, but they do exude that wisdom. They exude that change. Like, I'm doing better for myself now. And only, I think only not a handful, but there are only certain people who can recognize that. And that's okay. We are all on our path and we will all find that wisdom regardless. But that's my point when I say trauma changes you. It really just comes in many forms. I mean, I'm really kind of going off at this point, but if you have been through trauma, and the people who watch me, I can almost guarantee you undoubtedly, have gone through it. It will get better for you. And that's such a cliche thing to say, like, oh, go outside, it'll fix your depression. Like, no, that's not what I mean. I'm saying, if a 32-year-old woman who 2 years ago was sitting in a psych ward at this time almost, looking out on the 4th of July at the fireworks and thinking, it's going to just end. Like, it's never going to get better. I will be in this loop for the rest of my life. And I left, and I did change. I found the diagnosis. I was very sick, but I did change. I got into the therapy. I've done the work. I'm doing the work. It is a never-ending process to change. You are forever changing. And last thing I'll say about my friend earlier, we were both sitting there thinking, like, how did this happen to us? Like, why did this happen? And then, she had said, well, look who I am now because of it. And I'm like, you're not that way because of that. You've always been you. You just had a different path along the way. You just got off the path for a bit, and that's okay. It really is okay. And it's so sickening to hear this narrative. I mean, on the internet nowadays, you post one thing about like politics or just anything, people are like, oh, you the wrong way today. How dare you, you absolute piece of trash. Like, people, and I don't think people are this way because of anything. I mean, it's the internet. However, I think that, hurt people hurt people. It's a very simple concept. So my point is you're always going to be on the path to changing. You will always be changing. And those situations that happen to you, they can probably explain a lot if you think back far enough, if your brain will allow it. But if not, don't put yourself down over it. It changes you. It doesn't change you, but it helps you understand better. And I hope that makes sense. And I feel that those who have been through it will understand what I'm saying. And I very much admire you. I admire you. I don't care if I haven't spoken to you. I admire you for getting through those things. People are vicious out there. And you think, oh, everybody's been through trauma, then that means that the people who have caused the trauma have also been through trauma. It's a big cycling loop. It's like that doesn't make them good people. My actions that I've done to other people, you know what I mean? Like, I've had to pay for those things. I've done my work. And again, I will continue to do my work. But just don't think that your work is over, and don't think your life is over. It's not. You are going to get through this. That's what I said. Like, you're very strong for being able to get through this. You're very, very strong. And I know how it sounds, but please believe me. If I can do it, and if I'm doing it, I promise you that you can do it. Trauma changes you, but it doesn't change you. Does that make sense? Trauma changes you, but it doesn't change you. So with that being said, I hope any of this made sense, and I'll get to that room tour. It's just been a very, very busy legal day, if you get my drift. I love you, family, with all of my person. I hold space for you. I hold love for you. I hold time for you. I hold you in me, and I will be here with whatever you need to talk to, because I'm just, again, full of air. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.